Brooke or Joelle, you can just let me know when everyone's in, and I'll get started.
Okay.
How are we doing? Do we still have more people that are trying to get in?
Just admitted the last person who was in the waiting room. So I think we could probably go ahead and get started. We might have some more people come in, but I don't mind.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the second in a series of discussions hosted by the Maumee Watershed Alliance. This is part of a series that we're doing for the 2020-2021 River Summit. It's focused on the headwaters of the Maumee Watershed. Today, our title is The State of the Watershed, History and Impacts. I'd like to thank first and foremost, the Maumee Watershed Alliance for making this possible with their partners, the Upper Maumee Watershed Partnership, St. Joseph Initiative, Friends of Cedar Creek, Save Maumee, Fort Wayne City Utilities, the City of Defiance, Allen County Soil and Water Conservation District, the Nature Conservancy, and USDA NRCS. So today we have three exciting panelists with us. We have Anne Marie Shermchek with the Fort Wayne City Utilities. We also have Larry Antosh with the Ohio Farm Bureau and Larry Clemens with the Nature Conservancy. My name is Stephanie Singer and I'm with the Nature Conservancy and I'll be moderating today. And we also have Sharon Partridge. She'll be moderating the room. She's a program manager with the Allen County Soil and Water Conservation District and also with Maumee Watershed Alliance. So we'd like to just welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. If you have any questions and you are live here, you are welcome to post them in the chat. We'll be monitoring that and we'll have time at the end to go over those questions. But make sure that you include your contact information in case we don't get to your question. We will follow up with you and make sure that you get your answer. So we will be recording this program and it will be available on both the Allen County and the Maumee Watershed Alliance YouTube channels. So if you need to refer to it. Afterwards, also, you'll be getting an email with the recording and an invitation to register for the April 7th continuation of this River Summit series. So I'd like to start off today by giving each of our panel members around 3 minutes to give an introduction about themselves, telling us who they work for and just a little bit about their background. And we will start with Larry Antosh with the Ohio Farm Bureau.
Well, thank you. And good morning, everyone. Larry Antosh, I'm Senior Director of Policy Development and Environmental Policy with the Ohio Farm Bureau. Been with the Farm Bureau a little over 20 years. Prior to that, I had worked with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, overseeing the non-point source program and a lot of the TMDL 319 type activities prior to joining Farm Bureau. My main background or area of interest is water resource management. I have 3 multidisciplinary degrees, bachelor's from the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay in environmental science. My master's is from University of Texas at Dallas with environmental science focus. And then my PhD work with Iowa State dealing with water resources. So again, an area of that essentially might be unusual, that I'm doing exactly what I went to school to do. These days, it's not very common anymore, but the whole emphasis that I'm working on with Ohio Farm Bureau is, again, we're wanting to make sure that agriculture is engaged in these discussions, dealing with water quality, water resource management as we start moving forward. I do have to give our board all the credit 20 some odd years ago when they hired me to recognize that we needed someone on staff with the technical background to be able to address these issues. So with that and my time here with Farm Bureau. Again, a lot of working with our members to make sure we're engaged and working forward with on ag issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Larry. We'll move on to our second panel member, Anne Marie Smirchek. She's with the Fort Wayne City Utilities. Hi, Anne Marie.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thank you for having me today. As Stephanie said, my name is Anne Marie Smirchek. I work with Fort Wayne City Utilities as a sewer and stormwater engineering manager. So I have the pleasure of working with a great team of engineers to help implement our capital program related to sewer and storm sewers or stormwater. A little bit about my background. I have a degree in agricultural engineering from Purdue University and have actually been in kind of the realm of stormwater for my whole career, starting out working more on the floodplain side of things and floodplain mapping side of things, and then moving into municipal stormwater and sewer work. Here at Fort Wayne City Utilities, our utility is responsible for all three utilities. So the drinking water utility, a sewer utility, and a stormwater utility. We are a rate-based utility. And as part of this, we are also an MS4 Phase 2 community. And so looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne Marie. And then our last panelist, Larry Clemens with the Nature Conservancy. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you. And yeah, it's really nice to be on this program. It was really nice to get the invitation to be here. So I'm Larry Clemens. I'm the state director for the Nature Conservancy in Indiana. I've been with the organization for 29 years now. I'm about ready to say 30, but still at 29, and held a variety of roles in it. Most recently, I was the agriculture director for North America and set up a lot of our agricultural strategies. But what I'm perhaps most proud of in my career was back in 1992, when I moved to over here to Angola, Indiana, where I still have a house and a small farm, and started the Fish Creek Project for the Nature Conservancy, which was a project in DeKalb County, Williams County, Ohio, and Steuben County, Indiana. Whereas we were trying to improve the water quality of Fish Creek for the mussels. And so I hope to share more about sort of how that sort of led us into many growth opportunities for this larger watershed in the Western Lake Erie and the St. Joe and Maumee, et cetera. So I hope to share a little bit about that today. I'm really proud of the fact I have a small farm within this watershed that I just finished restoring all the wetlands on. So it's all restored back to trees and wetlands and a small amount of prairie. And so hopefully I'm giving you nothing but good water down there in Fort Wayne and then on downstream. And I'm particularly happy to have Stephanie Singer on here with us as a fellow TNC employee and now one of the people that's sort of carrying the banner for the Nature Conservancy and conservation in this watershed. So I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Larry. Okay, so the way that we're going to do the panel, I will ask a question and then we'll just go around to each of the panelists and give you a chance to respond to that. Like I said before, if you're watching this and you are listening and someone says something that you want some clarification on, or you have a question, please type it in the chat and we will try to get to those either in this program or we'll get back to you on your question. Really, our purpose here is to have this discussion and educate. So please ask questions. So the first question, I'm going to ask this from a historical perspective, thinking back of the history of when we were settled, starting to inhabit this area up until now. So the question is regarding water quality, specifically nutrient pollution. How did we get to the issues that we have today? And Larry Clemens, would you like to go first?
Well, you're sticking me with this one on the first right out. Well, you can talk forever on this, but if you really want to go back, I mean, obviously, the people on here, I recognize a lot of names, a lot of very knowledgeable people here that recognize, how the watershed here was formed. That we had the black swamp out there, that we had this sort of heavy clay soils that required lots of drainage for farming, and of course there were lots of scattered wetlands in this watershed that, for a variety of reasons, over time were drained for agriculture, for development, for golf courses, any number of things that altered the hydrology of this watershed. And I think it's like a lot of things led to the point today where we have some excess nutrients that are both coming off the land, but then are also contained within the channels of the ditches and streams and rivers that are still making their way to the Lake Erie basin. So I think there's certainly land use is a key part of it, and how we've as humans have altered the landscape and lost that sort of ability for our soils, our wetlands, forests, et cetera, to sort of hold water back and filter water and things like that. And then more recently, I think coupling that with the fact that we do get more intense storm events, just as our climate scientists told us would happen with extra greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We're seeing those more intense storm events. I see them on my own farm that I have, and it's often a challenge for farmers and landowners to manage all the water that we're getting nowadays that then carry the nutrients downstream.
Okay, thank you. Larry Antosh, would you like to cover that question from, more specifically the agriculture perspective, thinking about how things have evolved with agriculture?
Sure. As Larry already mentioned, obviously the land use and how we've managed the land resource has a major impact on our water resources. As I talk about and walk through my water resource management discussions or watershed management discussions, it's the land use. If the watershed is primarily an agricultural watershed, it's that agricultural land use that has the impact on the resource. As Ohio developed, and as mentioned, we have an area in Ohio Northwest that was a swampy area. Swamps were drained not only for production standpoint, but also for human health standpoint because of diseases and vectors and things on that nature. The ag drainage, essentially most of the land is drained or has ag drainage. So we're changing the hydrologic cycle a little bit, speeding it up because of the way the land is being managed. Farms have continuously, what we're seeing is that the medium size operation over the years is essentially, I don't want to say evaporating, but you're seeing the smaller farms and the larger farms just because of economies of scale, and the smaller niche marketing where you can go in and produce things on that basis. So from an agricultural standpoint, maybe a little less diverse in terms of scattered livestock into more confined livestock. I wouldn't say some of the earlier numbers were showing that livestock numbers probably are not that different. It's just that there's every farm doesn't have a few cows and hogs and chickens. They're more consolidated, mainly from a health standpoint of the animals, and also because of the economies of scale. So we're seeing some changes that way rather than a major change. They say farms are getting larger, so we're seeing have seen some of the reductions in fence rows and field borders and things on that nature. So it's all I don't say it's all driven by economy, but you're dealing with an industry that's kind of living on the edge, small margins, and so you're looking at all the ways you can to still stay in business. I don't know if that's, I can get into the how part of what we're seeing today is maybe an afterthought or or a piece due to in the 1980s when we had the IJC, Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. Essentially, we looked at and started focusing on total phosphorus and phosphorus delivery to Lake Erie. So the addressing sediment and attached phosphorus. You got point sources went in, had treatment areas. We did a great job on with conservation tillage and buffers and waterways of slowing down and trapping. Those areas now potentially or most likely are serving as sources. The slow, I don't say a slow bleed, but you've trapped did a good job of trapping sediment and phosphorus, and that's going to continuously lead into where we're at today with the dissolved phosphorus issues.
Okay, thank you so much, Larry. And then Anne Marie, can you continue that conversation from the urban city perspective?
Sure. So when we think of a city, whether it's Fort Wayne or any other community out there developing, I don't think we necessarily, we're thinking design standards way back when, and what kind of technical design standards we should be looking at. So we came in, we settled areas, we started maybe ditching things to move waste and other materials, whether it was waste or water, out. Thinking that diluting it, of course, just move it to the next bigger water body and dilute it and push it on down. Over time, then as our communities developed, and I'll speak specific to our city, we developed combined sewers. So our waste and our stormwater went into the same pipe, and as it rained, it would drain out to a river. We then put in wastewater treatment plants, trying to capture that and treat those flows. And that problem, we still continue to work on combined sewage today. We also look at how we drained areas, and it was just a matter of how quickly can I get the water away from my development. And we didn't have design standards that we do. We didn't have things like detention facilities going in. We didn't look at water quality as part of this. Over time, and if you look at how a community has developed, every iteration of it and every era of it, you can see how the standards have changed, how our design standard requirements have changed, where detention is required now, where water quality is required as part of a design. And you can see, you can look at the community and kind of see exactly how we have developed and built out our community. I think when you look today too, from our perspective, not only do we have, the one hand, we have water and water quality to worry about, we also have a drinking water utility. And so we have waters that we are concerned about and we want to protect because that's what's coming into our community. And so it's this balance here of managing all of these things while keeping your community growing and evolving. So I think we've come a long way. We're addressing, from my perspective, we are addressing a lot of issues. And I think that we continue to learn and evolve as we go. But, Mother Nature does a great job. And so some of the techniques that we're employing these days with green infrastructure and other things, I think those are some of our attempts now to recreate and protect and preserve our water assets here.
Okay, thank you so much, Anne Marie and Larry. I think all of your answers gave a really good whole picture of the ecosystem that we live in and our part in that ecosystem as human beings. So thank you so much. Okay, so my next question, this is, I hope not too controversial or hot topic or hot button issue here, but the question is, and you could answer this specifically about one part of this subject that you're involved in. Are more regulations needed or better compliance with existing regulations? So all of you did talk about problems that you see. So what do you think? Do we need more regulations, or what's the answer there? Do we have a volunteer on who wants to go first, or should I call on someone?
Oh, I'll go first. Why not?
Great, thanks, Larry.
Well, I think one of the things we need to think about or recognize is that there are a lot of regulations already out there. And I'll address this primarily from the agricultural perspective in Ohio, but I think other states would be very similar. And then, in the Ohio standpoint, we do have regulations that are saying that if, a fertilizer applicator certification, if you're going to be applying fertilizer, you must have a state off issued certification program. So training and certification, and that certification lasts for a couple of years, and then you go back and get some additional training and get recertified again. We also have regulations that it's primarily only focused in the Western Lake Erie Basin, but we have fertilizer and manure application restrictions during the winter time and during times of frozen and snow covered ground, during times when the soil is saturated. So you're looking at timing of and placement of nutrients at times that reduce the risk for offsite movement. So we have that regulation already in place. Ohio, and I'm sure Indiana and Michigan have something similar in terms of the Ohio agriculture pollution abatement laws, where again, you have in our case, it's Department of Agriculture that oversees making sure that there's not a sediment and manure contributions into the waters of the state. Overseeing all that too is Ohio EPA, and Ohio with the state water pollution laws where it's illegal to discharge into waters of the state. Tied on with the NPDES permits for any of the discharge and animal facilities that have a discharge or egg wash waters, things on that nature. Department of Agriculture has regulations for the livestock facilities, the concentrated animal feeding operations or livestock facilities. So in place, there's a lot of regulations already existing. I am not hearing a lot of issues in terms of violations of really of any of those. I mean, occasionally we'll get an issue where there may be a fish kill because of a ruptured manure distribution line that while land application or something getting into the tile or things of that nature. But in terms of the regulations that we have in place, I'm not hearing that we have compliance issues with those regulations. Now, if you take the high elevation look of just saying, okay, why are regulations good? Doesn't matter if it's agriculture or wherever. A lot of times we look at those as they establish the benchmarks. They establish the floor. The assumption is that everyone's going to be following the speed limit. I mean, we have a speed limit regulation. Assumption is that people are going to behave and follow it. 90% of the people probably do. Certain individuals don't. Seatbelt regulations, the same kinds of things. So the fact that a regulation is out there doesn't mean that it's going to be followed, but it does establish the kind of the benchmark or ceiling, and in some cases that may be the only way to get someone to make change their behavior to address the issue.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry, and thank you for that speed limit analogy. That makes sense. Anne-Marie or Larry, do either of you want to go next? Any volunteer?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thanks, Anne-Marie.
So I'm not sure you'd have anybody who's going to, I don't know a lot of people who would be just jumping up and down saying, yes, we want more regulations. And yet I think we have to, just like Larry was making the point of the speed limit or seatbelts, there's a reason for some of the regulations we do have. And there are a lot of regulations out there, but I think we've seen examples over and over again why it's a good thing to wear your seatbelt when you drive, if you're in an accident, things like that. there are regulations in place for all of us to help ensure public safety and other things. I think sometimes the question comes down to, do we really understand what the regulations are and what I think how the regulation is written and what is the intent of the regulation. And sometimes those are not one and the same. I think intention and understanding and what the actual rule says sometimes are interesting to take a look at and say, hey, I intended to do this, but my regulation is requiring something else. And so I think there's, I think this is kind of an interesting topic because it does give pause and give an opportunity to ask those questions and have those conversations. And I think that's a conversation sometimes we should be having with regulators or even within our own, within the watershed or within the community, you know, as one municipality to another, talking about those regulations and what do we need to do. You know, from a municipal standpoint, just like everybody else, we have X amount of money coming in. And so when new regulations come out, a lot of times you'll hear them called unfunded mandates. And so we have to balance, how do we provide the services we provide while addressing new regulation and making, you know, keeping our rates affordable for everybody. And so it's this ongoing balance of things, of affordability, safety, regulation, kind of all working together as we address each one of these issues.
Yes, Stephanie, I just like to add a little bit too, because Anne-Marie brought something to mind that I'd like to just address a little bit from the standpoint of from the Ohio Farm Bureau perspective, and our policies, which again are all grassroots based, come from our members up through up to the state. You know, our position is one of you know, regulations should be scientifically based. They should make sense, economically sound, and all of those kinds of things, which is one of the reasons why I'm on staff, is to make sure from a scientific, technical perspective, as programs get developed, as we're working with the legislature on new rules and programs and all that there is that basis behind it. So it's not like all regulations are bad if they make sense, if they make economic sense, if they're justifiable because of good science and all that, not just a knee-jerk reaction to an immediate concern that has happened. You know, those are the kinds of things that we work for with Ohio Farm Bureau.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that, both of you, for bringing that up about regulations are sometimes hard to follow because they require a lot of changes. So it is very important to make sure that we base them in science, because that makes it a lot, I guess, you know, the effort that we put into following them makes sense in the long run. Larry Clemens.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot, because this is a really tough one, because we got as we identified in the first question, a very complex challenge here. And so it's to solve it with a simple solution like one regulation is it's not how you solve complex problems and things. But I do think it's interesting that recently, you know, we're seeing some positive results out of places like the Chesapeake Bay, where they combine some regulation with really intense incentive packages and things, and they've seen some water quality improvements there that they're documenting. Not suggesting that the regulation needs to come here, because it's hard to compare where we're at right here in our part of the country with the Chesapeake Bay. It's just a different system and everything, but it is interesting there. And you know, I don't know, it's an interesting thing. As I worked around the country with a lot of top people in agriculture, top farmers and things like that, and when it does come to some challenges where nutrient runoff, say, is coming from farmers and things like that, the farmers that are really doing it right and documenting that they're doing it right sometimes get frustrated with their other farmer friends that perhaps aren't doing that, and there is pressure there that, you know, that may lead to regulation. So it's an interesting dynamic that I've been able to observe with, some of the sort of what you might call the, top conservation farmers that are really wanting to bring the rest of their farmer friends along and things with them. The bottom line we know is we've got to have a lot more conservation practices applied to the land. And we've got to figure out, how do we do that? Is it an incentive? Is it a floor that, gosh, everybody's got to at least do these things, and of course it has to be economic. And then, there's all the complications of then how do you implement things like that and things. But the bottom line is we do have to figure out how to get more conservation practices applied. We know they work. We just got to get them applied at scale. And that's probably one of the things as I look back on nearly 30 years of starting, say, the Fish Creek Project that, ultimately helped lead to the St. Joe Watershed Initiative and even some of this larger work is, boy, there's some people that have been at this for a lawful long time out here. And boy, it would be nice to really make some progress. And we just got to figure out how to crack that nut.
Yeah, thank you so much, all three of you. I think that leads into a discussion about if it's not regulated, it's voluntary, right? So we've talked about, some of you have mentioned these incentive or people doing practices, best management, whether they're farm or whether they're homeowner best management practices, or even best management practices for municipalities. So can you talk a little bit about, and Larry, you just mentioned this, we do have people who are these early adopters, these new adopters out on the innovative edge of either agriculture or their area. They're doing best management practices because they think it's good for the environment. And I in a lot of cases, it's actually good for their bottom line of their business. So can you talk a little bit about maybe what those best management practices would be and how we can bring more people along to do that? Larry, Larry Clemens, do you want to continue that since you mentioned the voluntary programs?
Yeah, well, and I think, we often describe it as we've got to get the infield farming practices in place. So things like cover crops, 4 R's of nutrient management and those types of practices. No-till and conservation tillage certainly fall in there as well. But then we have to also deal with the edge of field, because those practices don't trap everything that needs to be trapped or slow water, et cetera. So we got to think of from simple things as buffer strips, the 2-stage ditches, to drainage water management, things like that slow the water and allow for additional treatment. And then I think we even have to think even broader to downstream practices like, can we put some of our floodplains back into trees and wetlands so they can sort of do a final polishing? And that system of practices has to be in place. And I think that's been pretty well documented, that one conservation practice typically is not enough, that it's going to take a system of practices, especially today with the intense storm events we get. And even then, sometimes these systems don't work, even with a 3 or 4 inch rain, in a few hour period. But I think though, we have to think in terms of that. And I think a lot of the partners have been doing that. But I also think there are some things that we are starting to make some progress on around working with the agriculture advisors. And Ohio's been a leader here with the 4R certification program and getting those ag retailers into the conversations with farmers. I think that's important. I think technology still has to come along with us here. I think we still need some more technology breakthroughs. And then I think also, and this is becoming more and more of a widely known issue, but I think it's a really real one as well, is, a lot of farmers don't own the land that they're farming. And so it really takes 2 people to make a decision on some of these practices, especially on the edge of field and downstream practices. And we got to get landowners back in the conversation with what's going on in their land, with their farmer that's working the land, but to start to have a real conversation about a system of conservation practices there, so that it's not just the in the farm field practices that are being applied. I'll stop there because I know Larry and Ann probably have all sorts of comments themselves on this here.
Yeah, Larry, Antosh, do you have anything to add to that as far as how do we get that 10% that's not following the speed limit? How do we get them to how do we bring them along?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is to really understand what's holding back their ability to change. And, you know, as I gave my little pedigree here at the beginning, water resource management, really, I always felt that the occupation I had was more of a human resource management, because we're looking at behavior change. How do you create a change in behavior? What would it take for someone to change what they're doing? I have a nice little quarter acre lot here, turf grass operation in city of Columbus. I don't really want my neighbor to tell me how I have to manage my lawn. And so we want to maintain those kinds of flexibilities. What works for me maybe not work for Larry Clemens in his little operation. So we know that we have to do a better job, I think, of understanding the audience that we're dealing with. The components that Larry mentioned, you know, the fact that there's different land sizes, where they're at in the watershed, the land tenure, what kinds of crops or what they're growing, the age of the individual that's managing the operation. You know, I may say, hey, look, I'm 65 years old. I'm going to be 66. I'm not going to be doing this too much longer. Why should I invest more dollars into an operation that I don't have anyone to give the, you know, I'm not going to pass it on to another generation. I'm finished in farming. My cash flow is such that, so really looking at the demographics and the understanding that audience. And there's been some work that was done. Robin Wilson's been doing some research work and survey work there in the Maumee watershed for quite a while. There's been several surveys that she's done looking at what are these, what's stopping? Do you not have a good is there a lack of understanding of what the practice is that we're trying to do? Is there not enough information on the economics, on the return on investment? Is it looking at just the comfort level of being able to make that particular change? So there's a lot of information that's out there from a sociological standpoint and more of the social science rather than the hard science, but a lot of those are driving what happens. There's going to be a certain number of individuals as you go through the early adopters and you know, I guess the nasty word that when you look at that whole adoption curve, you've got the laggards, and that certain percentage of the laggards or a certain percentage of this, you're never going to make, you know, they're not going to do anything. They're just a group that we're not going to be addressing. What we're finding is that we're getting good conversations between farmers. I mean, we've got demonstration farms in the Blanchard watershed, and we're getting farmers, we're getting decision makers out there. But it's really that one-on-one, a small group setting where one of the farmers meets, one of the demonstration farmers invites their neighbors in, and they sit and they talk about what they're doing. Seems to have a better resonance of getting information out and maybe getting some change accomplished than just a standardized program where everyone who can walk in can participate. Probably a long-winded answer, but again, it's maintaining that flexibility. One size does not fit all, and that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, is that what works for me may not work for you just because of my business model. Is different and things on that nature.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry, for bringing up the peer-to-peer networking that farmers are doing, and also for, you know, just bringing it to light about how we have so many farms in our basin, and each of them is very complex in its own, making their own decisions. So yeah, it is important to realize that, you know, when we talk about farms, you know, we can't clump them all into, because they are each individually very different. So we'll move on to think about from Anne Marie's perspective. I guess I'd just like you to share a little bit from I've seen both the city of Fort Wayne and the city of Defiance doing more than what they're regulated to do as far as best management practices. So Anne Marie, if you could talk a little bit more about, extending this conversation, thinking about how are some cities doing more and what can we do to bring others along?
I think both Larry's raise a good point, which is a reality here, which is one size doesn't fit all. And what works for my community or a specific part of my community may not work even on the other side of town, let alone in another community. And so we have to go into it, I think, keeping that in the back of our mind, that one size doesn't fit all. But as far as being an early adopter and being and I'll also call it being proactive in implementing things. It might not even be necessarily implementing a new technology, but being proactive, knowing that perhaps a regulation is coming. I'll use the example of, we knew that regulations were coming for a consent decree, that we would have to address our combined sewer overflows. But in advance of that, the city, with partnership through a utility advisory group that we have, and others, really started proactively looking at, hey, what things can we start working on and start doing in advance to help as that is coming down. We know this regulation is coming. What can we do in advance? And so I think just, being able to take a look at what's coming, where we're at, what's coming down the road as far as regulation and other requirements, but other things that we want to do. It's not just the regulation, it's what's in the best interest of our community, our ratepayers, our environment, our economy. And there are things that drive all of that. I'll give you an example on a much smaller scale, though. The city of Fort Wayne for the last 10 or so years has had a homeowner rain garden program where we host workshops that are about a 3-hour time frame, and we have a handful of homeowners, about 20 or so, come in at a time. What we learned through that is education, and one-on-one education is really valuable. And so the more we can do to educate our citizens in our communities and our partners and others in the region, I think the better we become as far as getting people to think about doing, whether it's the small early adoption thing, maybe I won't, maybe I'll plant natives this year, or whether it's something much bigger. And so I think education and outreach and just having those conversations really does propel you many steps forward in the conversation and in early adoption.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for their answers. I just want to take a moment here to restate that if you're listening to this and questions are coming up in your mind, you're welcome to put them in the chat. As they come up, if there's something that you want to see addressed further, let us know. Okay. The next question. We know in our watershed, just thinking about the world is one thing, and the Western Lake Erie Basin is our focus right now, Maumee River watershed. So many groups, governmental, non-governmental, nonprofit individuals are working on these issues of water quality issues. How do you think that groups are working in the same direction? And also, do you see any non-traditional partners that have come into this space that are furthering improvements in water quality? Anyone want to take that first? Should I call on someone?
I'll start off.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
Quite honestly, I may be the least familiar with this watershed these days. So I want Larry and Ann as the experts to maybe fill in the mistakes I may say here. But I do think generally everybody certainly is pulling in the same direction towards improved water quality. I do think in every effort like this, you've got people that are pulling the same direction. They might be pulling on different ropes or a little bit different angle of the rope and things like that. But I think generally people are going in the right direction. And I say that because I think there are some new people that are sort of, jumping on the rope with us, if you want to sort of make a tug of war type of analogy, in the, ag businesses and things like that. Now, they may tug on the rope a little bit different than I do as a biologist, conservationist, out there. So they're going to be focused on the farmers' infield farming practices and things. I do think there's other people from the supply chain that are starting to come into play. You've got, big corporations, Walmart, and others that are setting some very aggressive sustainability goals. And so they're starting to come out here and get involved in the water quality. And often it's through their greenhouse gas reduction goals, but ultimately those same practices improve our water quality. So I think that's all good. I don't, I don't know if our partnerships, I don't know what the thing is. I will say this, and I want to hand it over then quickly, is, after 30 years or so, out here working, I remember in the field saying, gosh, we'll just need to let that farmer retire and let a new farmer come on. It's got more technology, more, sustainability, DNA in them, or et cetera. And that didn't work for me. It didn't happen. And so there's other things going on here, whether it's economics or whatever. And so that troubles me a little bit, to think that, we thought that time might solve some of this with our aggressive, outreach and things like that. And yet we still seem to have the challenges, and perhaps in some ways are getting worse because of the additional rain and stuff. So I'll cut it off there and hand it to Ann and Larry.
Okay, thank you so much.
I would agree with Larry. I think we are all working towards the same goal. I don't think anybody's getting up in the morning and thinking, hey, I'm gonna go, be a water quality polluter today or whatever, a deterrent in that. I think we are all working towards the same goal of trying to address water quality. And I agree. I don't think we all are coming at it from the same direction. But I think part of that is that perhaps the industries that we work in, or the capacity that we live in the watershed, doesn't, it just gives us different opportunities to work at water quality. So while a municipality may come at it from one direction, a general homeowner may say, hey, this is what I can do to contribute. And it might be something, again, it all contributes, and all these little things, everybody's participation in water quality adds up. And I think that's what we've got to start looking at, is that there's big programs and big lifts, but there's also all these little things that everybody can do, and they have a cumulative effect. As far as non-traditional partnerships go, though, I'll speak personally for myself. I work for city utilities, but I'm involved in the Maumee Watershed Alliance. And through that, I've had a lot of really interesting opportunities to maybe not work directly on a project, but to collaborate and share ideas with, whether it's other communities, other watershed organizations, industries, just citizen volunteers and advocates. All of those interactions and those opportunities to talk about different ideas and collaborate maybe on different ideas and opportunities, I think are what we're going to start seeing more and more. I think the low-hanging fruits of, hey, I can just do my thing, some of those are gone, and now we have to start looking at some of these other opportunities, whether it is, with a watershed group, an ag producer, another municipality, another community. I think there's some really great opportunities out there just waiting to be explored.
Thanks, Anne Marie, and for giving that. Thanks for giving that plug for the Maumee Watershed Alliance. I know as a fellow board member of that group, we are always looking for new partnerships and other groups to come on board to work together. So if you are listening to this right now and you're interested in more information, we will put that, we will put the link to our website in the chat, and we can also send that out at the end. Okay, Larry and Tosh, do you want to continue on with that discussion about partnerships and non-traditional partners in the ag space?
Sure, and I also agree that I think everyone is moving in the right direction or the same direction. Their focus might be a little different. Some individuals may be working on a program to make sure that that recreational needs are being met, or that drinking water needs are being met, or the water quality in the local stream versus the water quality of Lake Erie. So we're seeing this near field, far field kind of a discussion that's taking place. And so from a standpoint of addressing the issues, a lot of times it's more of has to be more of a communication concern. Just making sure everyone understands what your point of view is and what you're looking at, what you're working on. When I was managing the non-point source program, and we go out and work on with Ohio EPA, and we work with the local watershed group. Now, of course, our funding was out of the Federal Clean Water Act under Section 319, but that local watershed group was really interested more in a canoeing opportunity or a recreational opportunity. So and I say, well, that's nice, but our dollars are for this. And so if you're developing a watershed plan, you have to be able to focus on a water quality concern while these other activities or ancillary benefits go along with that. We're seeing now in the marketplace a lot of discussion about carbon, soil health, and carbon. The carbon markets are going crazy from a standpoint of interest, and that then leads into ecosystem markets and then the sustainability goals of a lot of the corporations and industries. How can they work with the agricultural community to install or have conservation practices on the ground that then will generate ecological goods and services or a benefit from either a carbon capture or from a nutrient reduction, that they then could buy those credits to help meet their sustainability goals. Not seeing it, that discussion right now is there's a pilot project up in the upper Scioto Basin in Ohio. Heritage Co-op is working with True Terra with their growers or their members to look at carbon markets and things on that nature. So that is probably the area that's seeing the most growth in terms of innovation, in terms of getting people together to address an issue. I know that City of Defiance is working upstream with a not a water quality trading from their drinking water standpoint. It's a project that's with the Great Lakes. I can't think of the name of the board right now. Pardon me on that. It's a little blanking on that. But again, phosphorus. It was phosphorus markets, and so now it's a focus on drinking water. So how can they do things in the watershed to protect their drinking water supply? So we're seeing these kinds of programs developing and expanding, and it's not so much that it's the conservation, or it may not be a water quality focus. It could be like a carbon focus, but water quality benefits are also on the side. So as new innovation comes up, as new technology comes up, as we're seeing, things being adopted and adapted, I think there's lots of opportunities, and it's not going to be your typical traditional program delivery. It's going to be something very, very different, and that's beginning to take shape as we speak.
Yeah, so thank you for those of you that brought up the carbon market. And I think that just reiterates this whole ecosystem idea. We're thinking about the air quality there, but we also have thinking about water quality and air quality is all part of one big system. So we can make improvements. So I'm going to ask one final question. I'm going to ask you to keep it to like a minute or so if you can, because we do want to give a few minutes for questions. So the last question is, what do you think are some of the largest strides that you've seen? And if you also want to talk about like any initiatives that you are involved in or your group is involved in that you're proud of or want to talk about, this would be the time to do that. So who wants to go first?
I'll go quick.
Yes, thanks, Larry.
Keep it quick. Okay. One of the things that I think is a recognition is that, at least from the Ohio Farm Bureau standpoint, from the ag community standpoint, and as the messaging that we've been doing, is that water quality and the production of safe food, affordable, plentiful food, they're not mutually exclusive. We can do them both. And so we're developing programs and looking at programs on how we can both maintain the resources that we have and enhance the resources that we have while still being able to produce the food and fiber that America wants. So I think that's a key point. I think there's also, it was brought up, Anne Marie brought up the point that we all have a role that we can play in addressing the issue. We're not doing the finger pointing that we used to do in the past, in terms of it's not me, it's you. It's not this. It's not the ag. It's the combined sewer or vice versa. We all have a role that we can play, and we all need to play along and make strides as we can. And I think probably one of the bigger things that I am encouraged about in the discussions is that we're beginning to get into into our discussions the whole concept of lag time, the fact that ecosystems take time to readjust, and just because we do an instantaneous a change on the landscape, it's not going to be an instantaneous water quality change. It's going to take time for that system to readjust and reequilibrate. So that whole lag time, getting out that unrealistic expectation that there's going to be an immediate response, I think is really key. And then of course, the recognition that we are in a I call it weather weirding, where we're seeing more extreme storm events, high intensity, short duration, having major impacts both in the rural communities, but also in our cities with urban flooding and things on that nature.
Thanks. Anne Marie?
I would say probably one of the biggest strides we've made is, I would say, raising awareness and changing perceptions of people that our rivers, our streams, our wetlands, that these are really valuable resources that can help drive healthy economies, that can help drive a healthy regional economy, not just a local community economy. And so I think working to change those perceptions and to really educate has been something that we continue to do, and that has benefit to it. One of the other things I think that is really, clean water drives, or good water health, I think drives these economies, but it also gives us an opportunity then to educate younger people through internship programs, through STEM outreach. I think these are opportunities to engage young people and children in our field of water and science and technology and all these great things. And so I think this is for us an opportunity at City Utilities. We really try to promote and advocate the future here. The future isn't just educating as far as like, hey, don't over fertilize. The future is also educating so that the next generation can come in and can continue this work. And so we're big advocates of those type of activities.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Larry Clemens.
All right, I'm going to talk really fast here. So I think one of the greatest strides, and I'm sort of focused on sort of that agriculture non-point source water quality aspect. I think one of the greatest strides that were ever made was back in the 1980s when we had a really strong farm bill of 1985 that coupled some expectations of farmers and the way we manage our land and landowners. And along with that was technology breakthroughs. So it was sort of that policy and technology that came hand in hand, and really seen a lot of conservation practices applied on the land. I think in between there in the early 90s and was in this tri-state region here, was that the three states, Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, started working more together. And it's because of the groups like the Maumee Watershed Alliance that started to get the conversations going here. And I think that was important. In the future, I still think it'll be some form of technology and maybe some market-driven forces and good policy that supports, landowners and farmers to do the conservation practices they need to do out there and stuff. So we got to have that in place.
Okay, thank you all so much. We are getting towards the end of our time. I did put the Maumee Watershed Alliance website in the chat, and Jen English also put some information about the Great Lakes Commission Conservation Kick program in the chat, and she had put her email address there in case you would like to find out more about that. Sharon, do we have any questions in the chat that we could quickly address before we close?
Stephanie, I don't see any there, but if I may, I have one.
Okay.
Larry Clemens, you mentioned the success of the Chesapeake Bay Project. And so I'm just curious, Chesapeake Bay or other successful projects that any of you are aware of, what are they doing differently to have that effect on clean water?
I'm trying to think. I tell you, especially on the nutrient front, I mean, there's been some watersheds where there's been documentation of, conservation practices applied at scale, and we've seen some nutrient reductions and things. In the Chesapeake Bay, and I'll give you an example, and this may be dated because this has been several years ago I was out there. I think the state of Maryland, we were doing a trip there, and they were talking about, they have roughly, I think it was roughly about 1 million acres of agricultural land. So tiny compared to Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan agricultural land. And yet they had like $22 million available for incentives and cost share to those growers on that 1 million acres of land. So they had a huge amount of cost share. That coupled with the regulations on nutrient management, they were seeing results. I don't think that's duplicable here in the Midwest because we just have so much agricultural land and we don't have the tax base that a state like Maryland has to come up with that level of incentive.
And I think historically you can look back into Ohio and the Michigan and Indiana from 1980s again, where we had essentially all-out effort looking at reducing phosphorus loads, total phosphorus loads into the Great Lakes. We've been able to meet that total phosphorus reduction target and maintain that all through, it was NPDES permitting, it was detergent phosphorus bans, it was conservation on the landscape. And so those programs were very successful and continue to be successful. The big challenge we have now is that we've changed, the focus has changed more from a total phosphorus standpoint, sediment and attached phosphorus, into the dissolved phosphorus and looking at what do we need to do to address the dissolved constituents rather than the particulates.
Thank you so much, everyone. I just want to give a special thanks to our panelists today. Thank you for taking the time to share your expertise with us. Thank you for everyone that's listening for taking the time out of your day to learn more about these important conservation topics. So with that, we'd like to invite you to the next part of the 2021 River Summit. It will take place on April 7th, and it will be a little longer. It will be from 9 a.m. until 12 till noon. The topic there will be science behind the water quality challenges. So once again, you'll be getting a follow-up email from Allen County Soil and Water with the recording of this and the invitation to join us next time. So I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for joining. Bye.